After the recent meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, many around the world breathed a sigh of relief, assuming that the trade war between the United States and China was finally entering a phase of de-escalation. American and Chinese media cautiously wrote about a shift toward a more constructive relationship, about promises of mutual concessions, about a temporary truce that could ease the unprecedented tensions of recent years. But according to insiders in Beijing's financial circles and analysts from leading Western outlets such as Financial Times and Bloomberg, all of this turned out to be nothing more than a façade, a showcase for the public that hides a far more dangerous and long-term strategic maneuver by China. While Trump publicly spoke of fantastic agreements, behind closed doors, Beijing had already decided to strike not at American industry or technology companies, but at the very core of America's global influence, the dollar. China began offloading United States Treasury securities at alarming speed, cutting its presence in the American national debt. According to United States Treasury data, cited by the New York Times and Bank of America's analytical reports, China has in recent months disposed of tens of billions of dollars worth of United States debt instruments, reducing its holdings to the lowest levels in 15 years. Experts call this the most significant reserve reallocation since the global financial crisis. And alongside this comes an even more worrying trend. The Chinese central bank is rapidly increasing its gold purchases. According to the World Gold Council, as reported by Reuters and Nikkei Asia, China's gold reserves have grown at record speed over the past year, a pattern often seen in states preparing for financial confrontation or anticipating intensifying sanctions pressure. This is a classic model of preparing to reduce dependence on the global dollar system. But China is not acting alone. It is systematically promoting settlement in national currencies with its major trading partners, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, and the countries of Southeast Asia. SWIFT is already recording steady growth in yuan-denominated transactions, and Shanghai's oil exchanges are offering contracts denominated not in dollars, but in the Chinese currency, prompting alarm among analysts because energy markets have long been the unshakable pillar of dollar dominance since the United States agreements with Saudi Arabia in the 1970s. Economists at Georgetown University stated in a recent report that if oil begins to be traded globally in yuan, the dollar will cease to be an irreplaceable reserve currency. And the most dangerous part is that Trump cannot influence this. He cannot force China to rebuild its holdings of United States debt, cannot compel Beijing to conduct settlements in dollars, and cannot stop Middle Eastern countries from looking toward the yuan. Meanwhile, Chinese diplomacy is doing everything it can to sow doubt among Washington's allies. But this vast geopolitical structure does not end there. According to Politico, Chinese banks are adopting national currency settlement models, even with European companies, as they seek to avoid secondary United States sanctions. Europe, now facing the threat of a trade war from Trump, is beginning to wonder whether it makes sense to tie its financial future exclusively to the dollar, especially when China offers highly favorable terms. At the same time, interest is growing in the creation of alternative BRICS financial institutions, their own payment system, their own credit mechanisms, their own reserves. Many analysts are convinced that this is a long-term project to dismantle the unipolar world order. Trump can impose tariffs, fine companies, attack TikTok and Chinese imports, but he is powerless to halt a process this global because the world is too tired of the pressure the dollar exerts on countries' economic policies. If earlier only Russia spoke about the need for de-dollarization, today this trend has become widespread. Argentina is discussing switching to the yuan in trade. Brazil is signing currency agreements with Beijing. Egypt, Turkey, and Indonesia are studying the conditions for connecting to Chinese financial platforms. According to analysts at Deutsche Bank, if the pace of transition to the yuan continues for at least 5 years, the share of the dollar in global trade will fall to a historic minimum, and the yuan will become a full-fledged alternative tool for international settlements. On Wall Street, they talk about this in whispers and behind closed doors. Insiders from the largest investment funds, according to CNBC, are already warning their clients about the need to diversify assets, fearing a silent financial earthquake. After all, If the dollar ceases to be a universal currency, America will lose its main advantage, the ability to cover huge budget deficits through issuance and global demand for its bonds. This is what for decades allowed the US to have an army more powerful than all other countries on the planet, to finance large-scale programs, to live on credit while forcing everyone else to play by American rules. But China is now destroying this model. It is building a parallel system in which Washington will no longer be able to press a button and block access to financing, will no longer be able to freeze assets, will no longer be able to dictate terms. And the more states join this new financial ecosystem, the harder it will be for the US to stop the process. Moreover, China is launching the digital yuan, a state digital currency that will eventually allow Beijing to completely bypass the dollar-based international system. According to the Wall Street Journal, in a number of African countries, pilot programs are already underway in which trade with China is carried out through the digital yuan directly, without the participation of the dollar or SWIFT. This technology is another foundation of the new order, and if one day the world's largest economies begin to massively switch to digital settlements with China, dependence on American banks will disappear, and then any Washington sanctions will become useless. IMF economists, commenting on the latest global reserve statistics, directly point to an accelerating trend. The share of the dollar is falling faster than expected, and the yuan is gradually moving from the category of an experimental currency to a systemic one. And in the opinion of many research centers, this process is already irreversible. The most alarming thing for the White House is that US allies are beginning to think about their own future without complete financial subordination to Washington. Saudi Arabia is openly discussing the possibility of accepting payment for oil in yuan, and this already undermines the very foundation of the petrodollar on which the US economy has rested for decades. Experts at Chatham House warn, if Riyadh takes this step, the domino effect will be immediate. Dozens of countries will switch to yuan settlements because China remains the largest buyer of oil in the world. Many analysts believe that the US is already late. China acts not in bursts but strategically, playing decades ahead. And according to respected researchers, in 10 years the world may wake up in a completely different reality, where the dollar is no longer the unquestioned king of finance, where Washington can no longer dictate terms to the rest of the world, where economic leadership is distributed among several centers of influence, and the main one among them is Beijing. This entire process is taking place almost unnoticed by the general public, without loud statements, but every number, every deal, every subtle diplomatic arrangement is dismantling the old world. For the first time in modern history, the United States is facing an opponent that is not trying to defeat it on the battlefield or in trade negotiations, but is systematically depriving it of its most powerful weapon, the status of the #1 currency. And while Trump makes sharp statements, threatens new tariffs, and accuses China of unfair play, Beijing acts quietly, methodically, and without the right to make a mistake.